To call
Is that Cook?
this meeting of the Amherst Finance Committee to order. It is July 12th, 2012, and it is 7:02. And I am chairing the meeting because this is the first meeting of the year, and one of the first things we have to do is elect a chair and a vice chair. So there isn't a chair and a vice chair, so it's me. I'm Sandy Pooler. I'm the finance director for the town. This being the first order of business, I will open nominations for chair of the Finance Committee. Ms. Moran.
I nominate Mr. Steinberg.
I second.
Mr. Steinberg's nomination has been made and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Is there any?
Is it a vice chair nomination? No. Not yet.
I was going to do them in sequence.
Okay. Alright. I thought you were taking all of them at the same time.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of Andy Steinberg as chair of the Finance Committee, please indicate by saying aye and raising your hands. I see 3. All opposed? Abstentions? So that's 3 in favor, 1 abstention, and 3 absent. Andy, you are now the chair of the committee.
Thank you, and thank you to the committee for your confidence in me for asking me to do this yet one more time. And we need to elect a vice chair, so I open for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Kay Moran for vice chair.
The nomination of Kay.
Second.
Any further nominations? Hearing none, then I guess I will also call for a vote on this. All in favor of Kay Moran indicate by raising hands. Opposed? Abstentions? So we have 3 in favor, 1 no opposed, 1 abstention, 3 members absent. And thank you, Kay, for agreeing to do this again.
Thank you for your vote of confidence, and I can continue to nag people who haven't done their minutes.
We're sort of, I do want to stick with the agenda a little bit. We may skip over some items and come back to them at a subsequent meeting because we only have 4 members present this evening. But news affecting budget, at least in the news chair sheet information, and to inform the people at home about where we are with the state budget. Other items, but
Passing a recap of the latest and final chair sheet. The governor signed the budget the other day. So these numbers are final. He vetoed some things, but it doesn't affect anything on these sheets. So as far as we're concerned, we know what our final budget numbers are. This is a 3-page document. What it shows is that we had a slight increase in Chapter 70 dollars of $32,000. Our charter school reimbursement was down $165,000, but that was offset by a decrease on the next page on our assessment. So that came out to be good for us. The biggest increase was on unrestricted general government aid. That was an increase of $514,000, which represents the $65 million added to unrestricted general government aid that the governor originally had proposed as part of money to be returned to cities and towns at the end of fiscal year 12 if the state had run a surplus. The legislature took a different view of that, and they put the money right in the FY13 budget. So the net increase in our revenue on this page is $373,000. Because there are decreases, which I'll go through in a second, on our assessments, in other words, what we owe the state, the total increase in our resources is $580,000. So I'll show you how we get to that on the next page. There are a set of assessments that are things we have to pay to various state agencies, or because of our tuition assessments, because of Amherst students who attend other school districts under the choice program or attend charter schools. Those figures are both down by a total of $206,000. And so if you add the 206 to that previous 373, that's how you get to the 580. So what this will mean, and I'll get to the final page in a minute, which is the regional section. What this will mean is that when we submit our recap sheet that shows our tax rate and so forth to the Department of Revenue this fall, if we do nothing, if none of this money is appropriated any further, it will mean that we will have to lower some other estimate that we had. We have all this extra money, so we're going to have to lower some other estimate, which will mean at the end of the year we'll create a lot of free cash. Or we could go to town meeting in the fall and ask the town meeting to spend some of this money. The area that we might think about doing that is to put it into, consider it one-time money and put it into something like our down payment on OPEB. Or if there are other similar one-time uses, because I think what will happen next is this money will then go into the FY14 base. It's not too soon to start thinking about that. And give us the foundation for whatever budget we're starting to build for FY14. I've already done that on kind of back of the envelope and playing around with it to see where things are, and I'm not ready to make a public pronouncement on that, but I would say that this will be a very important part of balancing the FY14 budget. So that's where we are on aid directly to Amherst. Again, I'll talk about region in a second, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
Could you speak a little bit about the charter school, like what, how these numbers really work and how they come out like this? I mean, what is so the state usually the charter schools, the state assesses the school system here for the kids going to charter school,
and then they reimburse us for some portion of what we have to pay.
So they are reimbursing us in this particular case. Where's the charge?
$171,000. So it's under.
Oh yeah, so they are reimbursing us $171,000. Although, then why were we expecting $336?
That is what appeared in the governor's budget. He does an estimate when he comes out with his budget. And the numbers you see under town management budget, that yellow heading, all those numbers originally were from the governor's budget. So when he came out with the budget in January, he had an estimated charge.
Getting to various towns. Yeah, okay.
And then for most of those numbers don't change. Although actually I would say, I mean, one of the other significant changes, frankly, is that he had estimated for Chapter 70 5.8 million, 13,000, and for unrestricted aid 6.6 million, and the legislature changed those numbers. So when we pass the budget at town meeting, usually the best number we have is the governor's budget, unless the legislature has taken an action such as passing a joint resolution on local aid. Some years they will do that, and then you can adjust those numbers. But
okay,
that's where we started from.
So in here on this charter school tuition here, on the second page, how are these numbers work?
If I may just to talk about that, because there's a couple things. So one of the things with charter school reimbursement and how we're charged for charter school costs. It's obviously based on the enrollment. There are kids that are enrolled in charter schools, but they have a sliding scale. So you phase into paying the full amount. And then, of course, they changed that this year as well. So that's a part of why I think this number's different as well, is that the formula got changed, which made it a little difficult to know exactly sort of what it was going to be.
Okay.
And that sort of thing.
Any other
So
comments?
they're assessing us 867 versus 1.05.
Yep.
Whether they were in the original budget.
Correct.
So that it is just something outside the control of the town. This is all happening at the level of the state.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Isn't it true that when the governor is making his budget in January, they don't have as much information as they do at the end of the fiscal year about what charter school enrollment will be for next year?
I think that's right. I would have to go back and check my notes, but there are various times in the year when they take censuses and figure these things out, and so I think generally you're right. I just don't happen to remember the exact dates.
Okay.
Could you just go over again options for use for that 580,000?
Okay.
Just do nothing, and if we do nothing, since we've already passed a budget, we'll have to lower the revenue that we get from other sources, right?
Yeah, to bring it back into
Right.
balance, because now we have more revenue than we have spending.
Or we could ask town meeting in the fall to appropriate it to stabilization, to the OPEB fund,
Yeah, right. I mean,
Or
if something else came
to
up that,
open another pool, or,
well, you know, and not to be facetious about it, but you know, last year we had the situation where we needed to come up with a source of funds for a grant. And the state grant cycle is about 6 months off from ours. So we've applied, we just did it yesterday, for a grant for the North Common, which is at least as much dirt as grass these days. So that might require a match if we get the grant and all that stuff. So, and that would be one time, you know, a one-time use. But all those other things that you said are also good possibilities.
for instance, not taking the 200,000 from reserves that we were going to balance the budget.
We could change the source. We could get rescission of the free cash appropriation, I think, although frankly that's a little bit weird because that free cash has been appropriated at the end of June 30th. It kind of goes away, and so to unappropriate something, I don't know how you get it back.
Yeah, okay.
So does the if we do nothing, the do nothing thing, does that then lower the tax rate, or does it revert to free cash?
It depends. If you leave all your other revenue estimates in place, it would lower the tax rate.
So that we don't appropriate the free cash, so we either need to, after consulting with the budget coordinating group and the select board, need to propose to allocate it to another expenditures to another fund, either OPEB trust or stabilization.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially by fall town meeting, we have to do one of those options.
Yes, or we could administratively just, it doesn't take a legislative action to change the revenue estimate. That's really an administrative function.
It's internal to the budget areas, correct?
I'm sorry.
It's essentially internal to the budget area, so it's under the control of the town manager.
Right,
In that regard,
and
much like, you know, your estimate for what it's going to cost for labor in a given department.
And Yeah, the revenue estimates have always, nobody votes on the revenue estimates. What you vote is an appropriation schedule.
Yeah.
It's shown, there are revenue estimates that are shown, and then administratively you can, if you make the decision when you file the recap sheet, because quite frankly, when you file the recap sheet, there's almost always something that's different. So for example, in the budget that the town meeting voted on, there was a new growth number. That was an estimate. That number always changes.
Right.
Because the assessor always comes up with different final numbers that get submitted. There may be other revenue estimates that you want to change because you see as fiscal year 12 closed, the estimates weren't good for some reason. You might have had a shortfall in something like investment income if interest rates were even lower than you thought, or you might have higher estimates for example, I was just looking at our end of the year permit revenue, and building permits are lower than the estimate, but electrical permits are way above the estimate. It's just a kind of factor of what kind of work is going on out there. So the long and the short of it is that when the assessor and the comptroller submit a recap sheet that brings everything into balance and changes all those things, and so if we're out of balance, typically you can just lower a local receipt estimate to bring things back into balance, unless there's a policy decision, as you point out, not to tax to the full levy capacity. In the guidelines that we've had, I believe both the Finance Committee and the Select Board assumed that we were taxing to the, it said both that we weren't going to have an override and that we would tax to the, so that's the operating assumption we've been working under.
Stuart, I interrupt, you had your hand up. And
Well, I just, whenever there is money, there's people fight over it.
Yes.
It's just, that's the nature of things. So I think it does, so there are, looks like there are a whole range of options what to do with this.
Yes.
Is the Finanace Committee going to take a position on this?
I think Andy
Yes.
alluded to, I think particularly through the BCG process, there'd probably be a discussion of this in the fall.
yeah, I think that what will happen is that no action can happen formally until you get to the fall town meeting. It's going to actually be in action.
Correct.
I think that we will ask for the advice of the budget coordinating group and then come back, and I'll explain that in a second, and then come back and have a meeting either probably in September ourselves to take this up and time it so that it comes after that other meeting of the budget coordinating group. There are a couple of things. One was the reason for the budget coordinating group is on the horizon to do that is that last year there were a number of spending requests that were made and that happened without discussion involving the schools and the library. And so that we wanted at least this year to have everybody at the table once before anybody makes a recommendation. The other thing I'll report is in a conversation with the superintendent and the director of finance for the schools a couple of days ago, I sort of mentioned this very subject, and there was a range of choices that we were going to have to all think about by September. And the reaction that I got from the schools is that they think that next year is going to be a difficult year, and that they're also worried about their federal grants being in jeopardy because of what's happening in Washington. and that they would favor doing whatever they are going to do to get through 13 so that we preserve the funds for 14. And that was their input to me.
And I think that's certainly in keeping with my thinking about FY14, that we may get more state aid over and above this, but I don't think there's going to be a lot more. I think it's going to be a tougher year. So preserving this money as much as possible so we can spend it in 14 is important.
Okay.
We actually did talk about this at some earlier meeting, which I can't find in the notes, and we have had a high degree of interest in putting at least some into the OPEB trust fund.
I think that is something that we need to consider, and of course the others, I think it's back to the OPEB policy question. We didn't put anything in OPEB trust last year, we put it into the stabilization fund, knowing we could move it to the OPEB trust and at a future date. But I think that's an important consideration that we have to make too. Next year could be very tight. That's been my assessment, and it's kind of the way I wrote up the Finanace Committee report to town meeting. And there hasn't been anything that's happened down in Washington that's made me change my position on that. So I think that's kind of where we are. Is there anything else that we should know about at this point?
I just, on this last page in this, I put together the numbers for the region. And this is a little bit of my best guesstimate on some of these numbers. The numbers that are shown under final are in fact the actual cherry sheet numbers for the region. What I'm less certain of is how the school committee is really thinking about this. I put this together and I sent it off to Rob yesterday, but I don't know if he wasn't in today, but he didn't get back to me. This is what I think the school committee budget was based on from before. I just wanted him to verify the numbers. I think overall we know that they are getting $64,000 more in Chapter 70 money than they had counted on, and they're getting this regional school transportation money, the $55,000 that was new to the budget this year, and then the charter school tuition reimbursement and the charter school sending. Even though they're both in black in these numbers, one offsets the other. In other words, the numbers below the dotted line are charges, the things above the dotted line are revenue. And so you have to net the things below the dotted line against the things above to see what their total net receipts are. That's just what a cherry sheet looks like for a region. So they do have some more funds than they originally thought.
Okay.
But are they in the same situation we are, that what would they do with that? Do they have to propose a spending proposal, or goes
They
into
could amend their budget, or they
A&D?
could go T&D.
Right.
They could put in their OPEB trust because they have
Yeah.
those as well.
They could do that too.
That's right.
Moving along then to the third agenda item, which was board committee liaison assignments. I feel sort of awkward doing the full set of liaison assignments with only 4 members of the committee present. And yes.
I recommend that we assign absent members to all
particularly anyone who's on vacation as opposed to those who are ill. The one thing that we do, what I was thinking about is whether there are any boards, committees, or liaisons that have work that they need to do between now and the September meeting. And I think the only one is the budget coordinating group.
What
Yeah.
about JCPC?
Well, I was going to say the audit committee needs to meet sometime this summer because we finally have everybody appointed to that, and we didn't have everybody. I believe and I think Bob said he was interested in being on that.
Well, I was interested in being in that, and I responded to an email back before the end of the fiscal year, saying that I was designating Bob based upon his expression of interest in doing it, and the fact that we made that assignment actually at this time last year, so he was just following it through. They're just meeting later than they expected.
Right.
So I think that letting Bob continue to serve makes perfect sense. Kay's raised the question as to whether there's any reason that JCPC will be meeting
before September. They may. I think the issue is, again, this park grant that we just applied for, whether that's something to bring before JCPC. I'm unaware of anything else that would have to happen in the summer, and even the park grant thing could happen in September, but JCPC generally does have its first meeting sometime in September, so we want people appointed in a timely manner for that.
Yeah, I believe that the other representatives have been appointed.
Yes, they have. The trustees and the school committee, and I believe the select board, although I didn't swear to it, have appointed their members.
Will we ask other members present? Last year it was the two of you. And so are the two of you interested in serving in it, or are you interested in either the budget coordinating group or JCPC at this point?
I have to understand what the work is.
I can report a little bit more, but why don't let's handle them separately so that you know what Joint Capital Planning Committee is, and
It meets weekly in the winter.
so the heaviest, it is a heavy responsibility starting roughly in January until April.
Finished in March, but usually beginning of April sometime.
Right.
So there are weekly meetings, and it's a extremely interesting process to go through, and you learn a lot about what's happening within the town, the schools, and the library. So it's a
Physically, you learn a lot about what's happening.
Right.
That's what's interesting.
and
So let me ask you, who was serving it on the, were you two?
Mr.
Or
Both,
are you going to continue doing that then?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, so.
So,
Okay. And as far as the budget coordinating group, it's traditionally been the chair of this committee, who's also then serves as co-chair of the budget coordinating group with the chair of the select board. I think that's where we've done it ever since there's been a budget coordinating group. The other member last year was Bob Saul. I've had an indication from Bob earlier on that he probably does not feel that he's going to have the time to do it again. I need to confirm that with him. And I have a indication from Janice that it is a group that a committee that she would be interested in serving on. So those are the two pieces that I guess I can report on BCG. Again, it's sort of as if there's anybody else who has an interest. I certainly would open it up to make sure that I'm hearing from everybody who's interested. And if not, then I would probably talk to Bob and Janice again and just make a decision.
yeah, I've served in the past, and I would serve again, but if Janice has an interest, then that's probably perfect, or Bob, either one. perfectly fine. I don't need to.
You usually assign one person from this committee to that, or two?
It's usually two, but since one is the chair, there's one other.
Well, my view is I'll serve wherever the finance committee needs me. So if there are, if Janice is interested in BCG and Bob's doing it, I'm fine with that. But if either of them doesn't want to do it or is not able to, and if there's a need for a second person, then I'm happy to.
Okay.
When is it met? When did it meet this last year? What time did it meet? The BCG. They met in the morning, didn't they?
Yes,
Yeah, we usually met earlier in the morning than we used
Oh, what days? There
Yeah.
might be a.
they met, this last year they met Thursdays at 8:30 or 9, but different times, different.
to. Yeah, we tend to try and do it so that we could hear from members about what their availability is,
Yeah,
and then try and do the best we can to accommodate the greatest number of people. So it has been a moving time assignment. There was a period when, to accommodate Irv Rhodes, we quit meeting in the late morning, which was when we had originally been meeting. The other things that will come up, and I'll come back to you because I do want you to take on some more role, is the liaisons to the other boards and committees are extremely important, and another role that we need is this year we're covering the audit committee with Bob Saul. But for the audit next year, we'll need to make an assignment. So there's that, and there are other assignments that will come up. But most of it is the question of liaisons to the trustees and the school committees. And this last year, Mary Lou ended up being the only active liaison to the school committees, which was a heavy assignment for one person. Usually we've made that two. So we can talk about that later, if that's okay. Shall we leave it that we're reappointing Kay and Doug to JCPC? We're designating me and Janice, or Bob, and I will talk to Bob and then Janice. And if neither of them is interested, then I'll let you know immediately, and just act accordingly. The liaisons for other boards and committees will hold until our next meeting.
And Bob to audit?
Bob is going to serve on the audit for the purpose of meeting for the FY13 audit, or 12 audit.
Well, actually, we still haven't met on the FY11 audit. The FY12 audit will be done in the fall. So we're going to try to meet on the 11 one this summer, and then when it's done, meet again in late fall or early winter.
Okay, so why don't we leave Bob on for the 11 audit, and then we'll talk about it again for the 12 audit, because that was, I think, how I responded to the question, Deborah. Reserve fund transfers is the required action item of the night.
So I want to go to this 2-page document. One, just to show the where the various budgets ended up at the end of the year. Every functional area of the general fund ended up in surplus, except community services. So some of them squeaked by, some of them did just fine. And Jones Library ended up with a slight surplus. Debt service ended up with a surplus just because of the timing of some of the debt associated with an Amherst housing project. The school is always, the region is always in balance because we just made a single transfer to them, and then however they're take care of things for our purposes, they're a separate entity. And we don't yet know what the final status of the elementary school budget is. We almost never do this time of year. But in any case, we're not looking to transfer money to them. So the one area that is out of balance is community services, and that is because of veteran services. They have continued to see a strong caseload. Earlier in the year, there was some indication there might be some drop-off, but that in fact turned out not to be the case. So we do need to supplement that budget. Again, anything that we spend on them is reimbursed by the state 75%. And we've looked at the numbers, for example, for this year. It's what we expect to get back for FY12. It's just shy of $200,000. So I think we are.
What's shy of $200,000?
The state reimbursement to us for our expenditures on veteran services. So I would ask the committee tonight to make a recommendation to vote a transfer of $37,420 from the reserve fund to the community services budget. The other issue that potentially was going to be a matter for a transfer tonight, but as it turns out is not, is how we are dealing with the snowstorm, the ice storm from October. Because it was such a big storm, because there was so much paperwork going back and forth, not just from Amherst, but from all the communities across the state that applied for reimbursement, the federal government, FEMA, and state government have been slower than usual in processing the paperwork, and so that's why at town meeting we were a little uncertain as to what to ask for. So we've submitted all our paperwork, and we've got preliminary approval for this $426,000 of reimbursement from the federal government. And so that is enough. The level of notification we've gotten is enough so that we can book that and be in balance for FY12 and not need to appropriate money at this time for that. They still do have more review that they're doing, and it is possible, according to what the Department of Revenue has told Sonia, that they could still disallow certain expenses, even though they've told us that we're probably going to get the money. We think that we're talking about minor dollars, but it still could happen. If that were to happen, it would then hit the FY13 DPW budget. And what we would have to do is make an appropriation. We'd either have to absorb it, depending on the size of it, within the FY13 DPW budget, or we would have to make an appropriation to bring that budget into balance. But we won't know that until the fall, or sometime later this summer. In any case, what that's going to mean is that the money that was appropriated at town meeting, $426,206, is not going to be needed now. It will remain unspent at the end of this fiscal year and will become part of our free cash that will be certified. So we still have the money. It moved from one pot to another pot and back to the first And so of the 100,000 that's in the reserve fund, we'll use 37, and that will mean there'll be a total that will be turned back between the storm money and the remainder of the reserve fund of $488,786.
Say that again.
It's at the bottom of this sheet right here. Okay,
Other side. Yeah, alright, that's okay, the wrong side, yeah.
786. That will be closed out to fund balance and become free cash once the state certifies that as part of our free cash this year. Are there any questions?
Are these are firm numbers, right? Expanded.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
These numbers are pretty firm.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. They were firm, as of last November in terms of the total expenditures on the storm.
Were you pointing to the storm or to the money for these columns here?
Oh, yeah, I'm seeing that right.
I think that because you were pointing to this expended column.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
those are the
Estimates of, are these numbers already kind of all there, or?
These numbers are, I would say, 99% firm.
Pretty good, okay. Alright.
okay.
Just one question, the shortfall on the first page for community services, 37,419, and on the reverse side, you're estimating a transfer value of 37,420, $1 more.
I think it's just because of the formatting and rounding.
Okay.
So when we asked for the transfer, we rounded to the nearest dollar.
Shall we make a motion?
Yes.
All right. I move to transfer $37,420 from the reserve fund to balance the community services budget for fiscal 12.
Is there a second? Seconded by
Second.
Anna. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Not all in favor indicate by raising hands. It's 4-0. But we don't have to do anything further because it just reverts to free cash.
Absolutely.
It's not a motion that needs to be made. So, any other questions about the closeout? We will be getting a year-end report in the usual format when it's
Right, that will happen in August, near the end of August. In anticipating the next agenda item, I brought a draft schedule, budget schedule, to hand out, and I think at the August 27th select board meeting, Sonia and I will present the end of the year financials. And then whenever the Finance Committee wants to meet near then to review that.
okay. So we should go ahead, at least in talking about the budget process calendar preliminarily now. The question of whether to review the other aspects of what the committee did last year and determine whether we want to make any changes in our methods of operation. I wonder if we should hold that otherwise for the full complement of the committee. But since you have the preliminary, at least to get the beginning of the year.
Yeah, again, this is very much in draft form. I have not reviewed the dates with the trustees or the school department. I just took last year's dates and adjusted them for this year, and if there were things that I knew that were different either last year or this year in particular, I did make adjustments there. But the general idea for the schedule is get things started in the fall. This does not have a meeting for BCG in September, but I do think given our discussion today, we should put something in for that. And so I think, Andy, if you and Stephanie could talk about that at some point.
Yes.
Well, and incorporate this. Again, at this stage, we're very much in draft stage. We are planning to have the presentation of our financial indicators report and the first formal presentation to the public generally of my financial forecast for FY14 on October 11th. And then everything is, pretty much in the same order, same pace as last time.
Yeah. I think to note is that for various reasons, town meeting will be starting late this year. The fall special town meeting is a much later date in November
Yes.
than is
Why
normal.
is that?
Partly because
Election availability of the town
Oh,
clerk
right,
because of
right.
the election and availability of the auditorium.
exactly.
So,
So it will mean if there are, things that are going to affect the tax rate or anything, taking them up early in the fall town meeting would be a good idea so we can have a rate setting hearing and so forth.
yeah, it's gonna, might want to check with town council on one particular item because town meeting needs to dissolve and then you have to have a certain number of days after town meeting before town meeting
It's
actions
effective, right?
become effective.
Yeah.
It is possible that it would be advisable to have a special town meeting called for the first night of town meeting to handle all of the budget items so that it can dissolve and move the 5 days more quickly.
Right. We'll look into that.
I think that's something that you might need to consider.
Is the rate setting hearing that you do, does that have to be done by the end of November, or does it have to? Or is it later than that?
Well, right now I have December 3rd as the classification hearing or rate setting hearing.
Right. What's the requirement? Do you know if anybody? I know it's always late November, early December.
You really want to do it early December because you have to give the Department of Revenue enough time to review and get back to you so you can mail your tax bills out.
Right.
That's really the operative issue. You want to get them in the mail by the first of the year so that they're due February 1st.
Right.
So, alright, so
Got the dreaded rush time in April for writing our report.
I know, but we always had that.
And this is a draft. We can change things.
Yeah.
That's why we're passing it out now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is to think about whether we want to or can. It's always a tight time because if you move the April 4th date for completing, then you're getting bumping up against not having the information of
Right.
where the House Ways and Means budget is.
Right.
And it's always good to have at least the House Ways and Means budget so that you know what you can reasonably expect from the state. So the annual dilemma does not go away, regrettably. Other questions, comments from you guys now on the schedule? Is there anything else that people want to talk about right now on any of the other items that are listed under item 5 on the agenda? I just really don't want to preclude people from saying things that they had thought that they wanted to raise. Okay.
Well, I don't think we should discuss it now, but 2 years ago, yeah, we had a little committee to discuss the report to town meeting and came up with a format. And I'm not sure the format works. So we might want to rethink how we're writing our report to town meeting.
Or do you think it doesn't work?
It's hard to fit all the departments into this one format. It might work, but we might want to at least see if people have other ideas. Or not.
But you're not suggesting change to the basic budget structure
No,
of
no, no, no.
5
Just our
functional
report.
areas?
Just our report to town meeting. But that's, I don't know, we shouldn't discuss it now.
Okay. No, so we could ask people to think about the report as being one item, just sort of flag it for the group for the next time.
Mm-hmm.
And by the hearing process, of course, I'm going to mean how it is that we're preparing for and how it is that we're conducting our meetings that we have with the department heads and the others. If there's anything that people would like to do differently and how we proceed with those. Otherwise, I think that we'll just go on as in the past. It's just an opportunity to think it through once a year. That then turns us to the, item number 6 on the agenda. We had 2 items were referred to us, or actually one we had agreed to take on and asked for referral of a part of a petition warrant article, and that is because it paired well with the investment policy question. And what Sandy said earlier was that there is a draft of an investment policy that Claire's developed and is ready to present to us. And we she couldn't be here tonight, and so that's another item that needs to put on to the fall agenda. I'm not. The question is whether we want to have either a subcommittee appointed for this in the next in item 6B, or designate a member of the committee to meet with Claire just to get a preview and raise any initial questions, so we have somebody from the committee who's looked at it and given it some additional thought beforehand. Have you done any work with investment policy, right? Is there anything that you do at the university that's analogous?
Not this way. Not in this way. More investment policy for your own investments, but not this way. But if you're why do you ask?
Well, I was just trying to see if that would be an appropriate role for you
I'm happy to
to
be.
play.
I'm happy to be part of it if you need somebody to.
Because it seems like it's an area that you
Sure.
they have some real some contribution that you could make that would be very helpful.
I'm certainly learn a lot, I'm sure. So I'm happy to do it.
But I think, I mean, the question is as you know, is how we choose in the criteria we use to choose the banks and investment vehicles. But there's an additional piece that we need to be talking about, and I assume that it's a part of this, is the question of longer-term investments, for particularly if we start putting funds in the OPEB trust, how we develop a plan that sort of maximizes return, but with an appropriate risk level for use of public funds.
That is a very good question. I will say that the draft that we have doesn't really address that. That gets more sophisticated than what we have drafted. And so it may be something that we need to discuss and incorporate. Generally right now the law allows trust funds like that to invest. There's a set of defined investment vehicles that you can use. It's basically the prudent person investing standard. The other option is to turn that money over to the state pool, the same pool that invests the state pension funds, PRIT, and have them manage the money. But I do think a discussion about how we want to think about those long-term investments would be important.
So speaking of having it, talking about taking the trust fund and having it basically run parallel with the state pension fund, could we potentially do that with our local version of that, which is the Hampshire County Retirement? Because they're doing that. I mean, that management of that trust is the same. Is constrained in the same way, has the same goals, different timeline, obviously, because and different amounts. But again, the intent is the same.
Any of the local any of the local retirement boards can put their money in the state fund.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was a law passed a few years ago that said if a local retirement board's returns were below a certain level over the years, they had to put their money in the state fund.
Right. This was wondering whether the OPEC trust could be invested in the same way that, in other words, could we, instead of putting it into the state pension fund as a mechanism for investment, whether the Hampshire County Retirement would be.
Oh, would we ask them to
Exactly.
manage it? I see. The law says you can either put it in the state or it's under the direction of the treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
Whether frankly, I've never gone down that road to think, could the treasurer ask Hampshire County?
Right.
I haven't heard of that happening, but there aren't that many OPEB funds out there being managed anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I think if the treasurer were to do it, we would frankly need an investment committee.
Mm-hmm.
We would hire some sort of financial advisor, I think, just like you would with any other major fund.
Well, and that's why I was thinking of Hampshire County, because they do that exact same sort of thing, and so it would.
Yeah.
But would also, the reason I suggested is just because it's, when you, not to say disparage the state pension investment group, but one would expect to have less control in that circumstance of the investment process, whereas at Hampshire County, it's local in a lot of ways. I mean, not to say it's better or not better, but I'm just saying that the level of control we would exert in our conversations within would potentially be greater.
Okay.
Which raises for me a kind of interesting governance question, because right now Amherst is the largest participant in the Hampshire County thing, and if we added more money to if they were managing the OPEB fund, would we have more of a voice in investment policy, or we don't even know whether they would take it on.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. First off, B is, how would they mix or segregate those investment policies?
I would presume that they'd be distinct in some way. I mean,
Well, clearly the money would be
the money
different in some
would be
sense,
distinct,
but you might even have different investment goals because
Right.
you're looking at different timelines.
Right, exactly.
And of course, the other body that deals with this with library trustees is they deal with their endowment. And I think we all get to the same realization, which is prudent person standard is fine, but a lot of prudent people have been losing money the last few years. And so how as a public entity do we make that choice, or suggest that the town be making that choice? It's a tough issue, and it's, the reason I brought it up is that when we originally talked about the OPEB trust thing, that was one of the suggestions that was made, is that it get rolled into the investment policy discussion. And so something that really comes back to haunt, especially if we're going to make the recommendation to put several $100,000 or more into that fund. Just put it in and have it earn no interest is a choice in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah, the concern I have is that that type of investing's fairly complex, and to sort of set up the apparatus to manage a proper investment committee and financial advisors and that sort of thing, which has an expense to it, which nibbles away at your return, but it also that's could be considered redundant. So one of the things, like you say, is if you put it in a state, you don't have to hire all of that, but there's a certain control that you lose when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise would be true if we went to Hampshire County or whatever. You'd have a certain loss of control in a sense because it's not wholly managed in town.
So one of the ways I was thinking about this was that, at least initially, whatever we start out with, I think we might want to start by putting it in the state, and then if we want to build up some capacity of our own, either if there are other entities like Hampshire County, or if we really thought we had a good investment committee, that again I think you would have to. That's too big a job to ask the treasurer to do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have some people who really know what they're doing,
Right.
and I think you have to hire some professionals. Those do come at a cost, and particularly when in the early years when the fund is small, you want to really keep those costs down.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's at least how I was thinking about it. But maybe we should keep discussing it.
I'm sorry to sort of digress a bit about this, but if we were to put it into the state fund, would it be? Could we get it back out? I guess
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something where you're locked into that mechanism for some period of years. It's longer than you might be comfortable with.
No, I think they do have certain rules about notice, about
Sure.
liquidity and things like that.
Right.
Generally, no. I think you can go in and come out as you want.
Do we have a policy document now?
No, that's part of the reason that Claire and I this last year worked on an investment policy, and wanted to bring it to the Finance Committee for your review and comment, and then incorporate it with all the other financial policies that we have.
So, Eric, would you be willing to meet with Sandy and Claire at some point over the next couple of months to go over their draft, raise any questions that you feel are appropriate, and then from there bring it back to us at our subsequent meeting?
Sure.
Is that okay?
That's terrific.
Okay. The other thing that we have, of course, is the Bank of Massachusetts proposal, which was the second part of the petition article. It was also referred to us by a separate motion of town meeting, and we do need to look into that and give that some consideration. I think the question is, should we appoint a subcommittee, or can we also appoint a single member to do this? And I'm asking your input on this. My thinking is, as far as the process, probably doesn't make, it's only a question of who does it and how many people are involved, but I think we need to meet with the petitioner. That person or people need to learn a little bit more about this analogous bank in another state wants to model it after, I think it would be helpful to find out what Treasurer Grossman has done, because State Treasurer has done a fair amount, which I think the petitioner referred to at town meeting, about trying to get state funds, to the extent possible that he has control of, invested in state banks that do stimulate state activity. And it may be that as much is being done as is possible to be done, and that the treasurer might have that. And I think Mr. O'Connor may be making similar inquiries. But it's really a fact-gathering assignment at this point, in order to see whether town taking a position to urge something is appropriate or not, which is what we're ultimately having to go back to town meeting and report on. And so do you think, what is your thoughts, anyone?
The fact finding sounds like a lot of work.
Depends, yeah.
And
I don't know. I don't know. And how much do we need to do, I guess, is the question.
Find out more about the Bank of North Dakota.
I think that's probably, that's sort of what I was getting at, I suppose, is finding out more about the Bank of North Dakota and finding out whether there are alternative vehicles for investment of public funds that are being worked on by others that sort of take away the need. And then the third question is whether it is an appropriate topic for the town to continue to pursue as a town meeting. And we did ask for referral, and it has been referred to us, so I think we need to give it due consideration.
Can you, I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around it. Seems so open-ended. What are we going to accomplish here? This is Vince O'Connor's motion, right?
I think that's the problem is that the first part of his petition article had to do with a very specific thing that tied with how the town invested its own money in the kinds of banks that we used. And what we found was that most of our money is in local banks, which is what his recommendation was to begin with. And so the question is, does the investment policy address that? I think that would, so you take the first part of his petition article and pair it out against the investments. I think that we will see an answer there fairly clearly. Then the second part had to do with this establishing a bank in Massachusetts, and whether we as a town want to recommend to the legislature taking an action. And I think that there was sort of some hesitations about just jumping into doing that. One is that I think you lightly should ask the legislature to do something if you don't know what you're asking them to do. And second of all, did it seem even a wise request? And we sort of were uncertain as to whether what our position was, and we sort of said, there just wasn't enough information to really make a judgment, and that's where why we asked for referral back to the committee. Since we asked for referral back to the committee, I think that we need to do something.
I think you could go back and have the town meeting vote for it, vote it down.
I think no matter what town meeting does, the chance of legislature doing anything about it are about as low as the investment returns we're getting these days.
Well, the other way to do that is to have a discussion in the finance committee about we don't have banking expertise in this committee.
No.
So we can bring somebody who knows about banks and have them educate us about it. And have, instead of, because, to me it seems like there are two ways to approach it. One is extremely labor intensive, to actually go out and do all the research and see what the pros and cons are. But to do the research well, you have to have some kind of a background to understand the information which could be coming your way. And we don't have the capacity on this committee to absorb that information. The other way is to just do it deductively, that, that the finance committee at this point does or does not feel it's, I don't know what the correct words are for it, but the finance committee does or does not consider this a priority for the limited number of hours available to us to work on various things. Because it could also be, there are only so many things we can do. We have, if you count the number of hours in the year, then we have only set 20 number of hours, and those, I think one of the important decisions we make is how to allocate our hours to the various tasks that need to be done. So unless it's a really high priority thing, it has to go down in the list, and then we may not be able to get to it.
I guess the problem I have with that is that it was our committee's motion to refer it to us. Yeah.
But a motion to refer does not necessarily mean that the committee that it's being referred to has to take action on it. If you want, I will volunteer to find out more about the Bank of North Dakota. That was held up as an example of what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts should do. And, I don't think we know enough about that bank to know whether it's applicable to Massachusetts. It certainly has a long history, but it started, as far as I understand it, started in an agricultural state to kind of support farming. So.
Well, and that's why I actually brought up the thing about what Treasurer Grossman has done. I don't know if you've read much about that, but his concern was, and it's really not different from what Mr. O'Connor has stated, is his concern that he wanted to, the Treasurer wanted to have, to the extent possible, state funds be invested in banks that would provide loans to stimulate small business activity within the Commonwealth, and therefore he set aside some amount of state funds that would be deposited with state banks to achieve that purpose.
I think that's true, although I also think it's a fraction, and not a very big fraction of the total state investment. So I think it goes a little too far to say to the extent possible, because it is, I think he set aside some portion and he said, I'm gonna invest this amount in local banks. But
And my two questions that I would ask the treasurer of this office then is, was that decision made because it was imprudent to invest more in that manner, or was it not possible to find banks that could stimulate to make the kinds of loans to a larger amount of money? Did they cap it? What was the reason that it was limited?
I don't know who can get that answer. I suspect that the reason it was done from a totally different point of view is, and that is, we could do this amount, it looks good, and so we're going to do it.
It's possible. But it would be helpful to know if they made a judgment that it was either imprudent or impossible to go to a higher amount, and therefore they capped it, then the whole concept of creating a bank as recommended by the petitioner sort of doesn't make sense. Because it's sort of the same thing all over again, and it would just be an easy thing to report back. Yes?
I agree with something on your I said earlier, which is that to gather a totality of information, it's really beyond our capacity, because we need to know more about banking and investing to come with some analysis on why Treasurer Grossman hasn't invested at all in local banks. And I think that was a problem that we felt with the article in the first place, that it's an extremely complex issue, and it was an attempt to find, it looked like a simple answer to a problem that we don't even, that's complex. And I'm not sure if we study it more and more that we're going to come up with any different feeling about it.
Maybe we can ask the town meeting to allocate $60,000 to have a consultant.
I think that's an option. Leave it at that. Why don't we do just two little things? And you've said that you could spend a little bit of time just sort of becoming familiar with what happened in Bank of North Dakota.
Well, if we can get Vince to give us the monograph he says he has.
And if not, if you might be just finding Wikipedia in a half hour's time, you might find some interesting information anyway.
Yeah, it's like it's run by the governor, the treasurer, and the auditor in the state. They're it. They're in control of it. It was set up that way, and it's always been that way.
And I will at least make an attempt to get a hold of the treasurer's office, and either I'll get information or not. Sort of covers those bases, but I'll try. And then we'll see where we are from there. And I think that kind of ends that one. So, anything more to be said? If not,
I think my sense is, though, I think once we let our minds settle around this issue, I think we can probably come up with something to the effect that our research reveals that, with the caveat that our research cannot be exhaustive given the resource constraints, and based on what we find, our position on this issue is such. But I think we need to acknowledge that we have finite resources to address this.
Yeah.
Yes. And the other thing is, we can just come out and say this, but we don't really have anything to react against right now, because there's no article. If he's planning to bring it back to the fall town meeting, then we'll have a position on it. We'll be ready with more of a position. But I don't feel that we need to bring an article to town meeting.
The only thing I would suggest along those lines is that if we are prepared when fall town meeting happens, then perhaps as part of the finance committee report to town meeting, we could comment in that regard. But if we're not ready at that point, then we don't comment in that regard. And then, of course, obviously, like you said, if there's an article we then or in some subsequent town meeting, we can be more explicit at that point in time.
Yeah, I'm not sure we would do more than a small section in our next report. Yes,
No, I'm sorry.
okay.
Good.
We've already talked about the agenda for the next meeting. I think we've built a fairly substantial agenda already, and I can't think of anything that we would need to add. I think we need a date for the meeting, and then, of course, if you have additional agenda items to think about, please let me know. But we are going to do the investment policy, and we're going to talk about that. The we'll make it come after the BCG meeting, so that we can then see if there's any recommendations that come from the BCG regarding the next what to do, if anything. But that will put us in a position to start thinking about whether we have an active recommendation to make to the fall town meeting, like the OPEB Trust recommendation, and we will continue on with the appointments of the liaisons and the review from the prior year. That sound correct? And I'll have to check with Stephanie, but I would tentatively be looking toward at a Thursday towards the end of the month, possibly the last Thursday. September. I have to check to see if that's a holiday I need to be aware of or anything like that. But until we have a BCG schedule, we can't really schedule a meeting for ourselves.
Oh, year's almost over. Last Thursday in
This is
September.
27th.
Yom Kippur is on Wednesday, but does it extend into the Thursday?
If Yom, we'll have to check that because if
It begins sundown Tuesday.
begins sundown Tuesday and ends sundown Wednesday,
So
and
next-
so Thursday would not be a problem day. I'll put that down as tentative, just in meantime I'll check with Stephanie and then we'll consult Sandy. You'll have to let us know what you think works, and we'll find out what John thinks.
Mm-hmm.
I assume he's still on vacation.
He is. So now he's checking his email only about once an hour.
This is not something I would send an email to him.
He's relaxed, huh?
Yeah, that's it. Totally chilled out.
Yeah, now that the War Memorial pool's open.
Totally.
And so that brings us to the minutes, because I don't think we have any anticipated items. Do we have 4 sets of minutes? Am I correct on that?
Jeez.
I think we had the one Doug sent, and one that we got from Bob Saul.
Right.
We got some from Bob Saul and Ron. And so I think that in the order in which they happened, October 13th, 2011 minutes, ones that Doug sent to us.
Sandy had sent me an edit that I will find and read to you, which was she suggested some spacing, which of course I can do, which is not. And then the other piece was a rephrasing of a sentence discussion of Article 17, fourth sentence.
Great, Article 17.
That's near the bottom of that section, which
Yep.
we'll try
Alright.
out with that. So he suggests the fourth sentence read, Tucker replied that the intent of the change is,
Oh, I'm sorry. What page are you on?
2, 3.
Three.
Bottom of 3.
the intent of the change is to shape the kind and types of development and also to create predictability in the development process, which is lacking currently. And I can give you a copy of that.
Yeah, what happened if you did?
And then there's one other thing on that same page, just a single letter missing. In the one that says on Article 15, the fourth line down, thus it will,
I'm sorry, Andy. I'm gonna change it. Okay, alright. Fourth line down.
thus it will give us town-wide information filling in gaps.
Not five.
So we have those suggestions that Doug is providing in writing to Kay
Did.
and then one additional, is there anything else? So, motion?
Move we recommend, move we approve the minutes of
October 13, 2011.
October 13, 2011 as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate raising hands. 4-0, 3 members absent. The next set of minutes is, I believe, March 8th. I'm going in order that they were presented. These are from
I got comments from Sandy and Janice, and I think I revised those and sent them out.
yeah.
Did-
I think I was looking at what you had. So, and I had a couple, just 2 comments. One is I thought they were very helpful, very well written, and I appreciated. The only thing that I was wondering about is that there were those things that says like note that Kay took the minutes until Honor had arrived.
Yeah.
You take those out?
Yeah, and I think, and then in the next paragraph, I think this is where you came in.
Yeah.
That to be deleted. And Anurag's notes, which is on page 2.
Take that out.
Then the second thing is, and this is a little bit more trouble, the list is partial. Documents used at the meeting. Do we really believe the list is incomplete? Or was that essentially the items distributed in?
This is on the March 8th, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure, Anurag, whether I wrote that or you wrote that.
I think that's. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really touch.
That seems to be all the documents we used.
Okay.
Yeah.
So take it out.
Take out list as partial. All right. And put it at the end.
Yeah. And then the only other suggestion I had is, and this one is at the bottom of page 2,
Number 4.
where you said number 4, back to the world of spreadsheets. I was wondering if we should say financial projections for FY13.
I think that would be a fair thing to do. Should I make these changes or?
Kate will take
Thank
care
you.
of it at this point. Anything else? Okay,
Move we approve the minutes of March 8th as amended.
Second.
okay, motion has been made and seconded by Doug. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor indicate by raising hands. 4-0, 3 members absent. The next minutes then in order presented are our order of meetings rather is April 19. And on this one, I really the only things that I would suggest is that at the beginning where it says note that Kate took the notes until, and then Kate's notes, and then Anurag's notes, to eliminate those is unnecessary.
Okay.
And everything else, I have nothing to suggest. Okay,
Move we approve the minutes of April 19th, 2012.
Second.
okay, there's been a motion made by Kay, seconded by Doug, as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by raising hands. 4-0, 3 members absent. And finally, April 30, which is Bob Saul's minutes from one of the meetings that was held prior to town meeting at the music room. Any corrections? It was a very
I don't have that set with me.
One pager?
it's actually two. It's just goes into the back.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I don't know why I don't have it with me. I don't have any suggested changes.
So is there a motion to be made?
I'm going to recommend the minutes of April 30th.
Second.
Okay, so we've Doug and the minutes of April 30th. Any further discussion? None, all in favor indicate by raising hands. 4, so it's 4-0. And 3 members absent. And I think that then takes us through the agenda. I have not thought of anything I didn't think about 48 hours ago. So I guess a motion to adjourn is in order. And we are adjourned at 8:30.